Hello, I'm William Target, and welcome to another episode of Know Your History, where this week we'll be looking back at the history of Corinthian Casuals. The club came to be in 1939, following a merger of two clubs, the Corinthians, founded in 1882, and the Casuals, founded a year later. Both clubs had considerable pedigree in amateur football. At the turn of the century, the Corinthians were a major force in the country, on two occasions filling the entire England national team, and in 1904 handing Manchester United an 11-3 defeat. Throughout the 20s and 30s, the club routinely appeared in the early rounds of the FA Cup, frequently playing against and sometimes beating opposition, who these days ply their trade in the Premier League. As well as success on domestic shores, the Corinthians also toured extensively across Europe and South America, where they inspired the formation of the Brazilian club Corinthians. The Casuals, meanwhile, were founder members of the Isthmian League in 1905, runners-up of the first ever FA Amateur Cup in 1894, a competition they would go on to win in 1936, drawing 1-1 against Ilford in the final at Selhurst Park, before winning the replay 2-0 at Upton Park. Following the merger of the two clubs in 1939, the Corinthian Casuals played in only one game before the outbreak of the Second World War. Following the war, the club played their football in the Isthmian League, enjoying some success in cup competitions in the 1950s. In 1954, the Surrey Senior Cup made its way into their trophy cabinet, following a 2-0 win over Epsom. 2 years later, the club looked to emulate the success of the Casuals Amateur Cup winning side of 1936, as they reached the final at Wembley Stadium to play Bishop Auckland. The game ended in a 1-1 draw, with the replay being played at Ayresome Park, the former home of Middlesbrough. Unfortunately, the trophy would remain in the North East, as Auckland comfortably won the replay 4-1. The following season saw Casuals reach the semi-finals. They were beaten 4-2 by Wycombe Wanderers. The 60s and 70s were difficult times for the club, with a rare highlight coming in the 1965-66 season, as they reached the first round of the FA Cup for the first time, losing to 3rd Division Watford. From here began an era of struggle, as the club finished bottom of the Isthmian League in 1969, and then for 4 successive seasons in the first half of the 70s. This ended with the Casuals being relegated to the newly formed Isthmian League Division 2, which they were again relegated from in 1978. It was from this lowly league position, however, that the club again reached the first round of the FA Cup in 1983, forcing a replay against 4th Division Bristol City that was lost 4-0. The same season saw Casuals finish 5th in the table, only to be thrown out of the Isthmian League altogether following new rules against ground sharing, with the club taking up residence in the Premier Division of the Spartan League. The debut season saw them relegated to the Senior Division, which was won the following year, the club's first league title, to secure an immediate return to the Premier Division. In 1988, the Brazilian Corinthians invited the English club to Sao Paulo for a friendly to celebrate their 100th anniversary, a game in which the legendary Brazilian footballer Socrates turned out for both clubs, playing for the Casuals in the second half. It signalled a change in fortunes for the club, as that same year they secured their first home ground, King George's Field, where they remain to this day. The Spartan League Cup was won in 1995, following which the club transferred to the Combined Counties League, finishing second in their debut season to make a glorious return to Division 3 of the Isthmian League. The league was reorganised several times over the next few seasons, with the Casuals changing divisions multiple times before eventually settling in the Isthmian Division 1 South in 2006. The club stayed in this division for just over a decade, during which time they won the Surrey Senior Cup for the second time, beating Leatherhead 2-0 in the final. Knocking on the door of promotion, the club reached the playoff final in back-to-back seasons in 2017 and 18, only to lose on penalties on both occasions. However, another reorganisation of the division saw the Casuals promoted to the Isthmian Premier anyway. Their debut season in the Premier was a difficult one before being cut short by the pandemic, with the club hovering precariously above the relegation zone going into the final stages of the season. Thank you for joining me for this week's Know Your History. Please join me again next week, when we'll be covering the history of another team in the Isthmian Premier.